Today we have a very special guest in our studio, Mr. Mahmud Jafri. He is the founder, president, and CEO of Dover Rug and Home, which is a brand name store which has been ranked by Best of Boston by the Boston Magazine, and also has received numerous awards by the Readers Best Choice Readers Award, and also Mahmud is a philanthropist. He has contributes a lot to various type of charities, and so we would like to welcome Mahmud to our studio, and we are really very glad to have you here.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, Mr. Mishra. I have been following your publication for a long time, and you have not only done service to me and my organization, but also to the community by connecting immigrant-owned businesses. And it's a great service that you're providing for the Indian Pakistani diaspora to be able to connect with first or second generation immigrants who are entrepreneurs in New England. So it's I'm honored.
Well, and we are really happy to have you here. Very excited that you are here. And so let us start. Recently, we heard that you opened a new store in Boston near Copley Place.
Yes.
And so tell us about that. Already you have a very successful store in Natick. And what prompted you to open in Boston?
You know, the old saying that need is mother of invention. As you may have noticed that since the big dig has been completed in Boston, it's a very different city that we used to know even 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. It has become a very booming residential luxury market. The demographics is as such that the baby boomers, empty nesters, who did well financially and owned these wonderful big homes in the suburbs, don't have need for those homes, and there's a change in lifestyle. They're downsizing, but downsizing may only mean square footage. They're not necessarily downsizing in terms of the price point or the services or the luxury that they're looking for. So this luxury housing in Boston is exploding, the higher end of the market, which is what our target market is and has been in the suburbs.
So is the Boston store is going to cater more to the luxury market?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's our core expertise. Over the years, we have just about every price point. We will have rugs as basic and simple as machine-made polypropylene to extremely finely hand-knotted traditional Persian and antique carpets, more fashion-forward, contemporary for more urban markets, and everything in between. But I think Boston market, especially where we are in Back Bay, tends to cater to a more urban, affluent community, which is our core market anyways.
Is there going to be any difference in terms of merchandise between Natick store and Boston store?
No. We are essentially not changing our market or our target audience. Our audience is still the same. It's the same audience that grew up with us in the affluent communities in the suburbs of Boston, who has moved to Boston, and of course the younger generation who has decided to live in the city that has fine taste and they want fine furnishings, and that's why our location is in the hub of which has been coined as the luxury home furnishings district in Boston. It's frankly within a mile radius that all these stores have emerged, and they're all within walking distance of some of these high-end residential units.
Can you talk a little bit about, say, in terms of price range? You know, what is the lowest price rug you will have in Boston or Natick?
Let's say a standard size 8 by 10. Obviously, the price is established by the size. You can buy an 8 by 10 rug in a machine-made polypropylene category as little as $200. Or you could also buy an 8 by 10 rug if it happens to be a 100-year-old fine antique for $200,000. Unfortunately, that's the nature of our business. It's an art form which obviously has a utility factor to it. It's used as home furnishings. So people buy it for both reasons. People buy it for artistic reasons, for unique reasons, for colors, designs, and trends. But they also buy it because they need a rug for their living room, for their dining room. So there's a practical side to it, and then there's an artistic side.
So what is the high range price? Like if you go
high range, I would say, for once again, an 8x10 rug, high range would be, say, 4,000 to 15,000 range. That would be the high end. But if you translate that price point into what goes into making that rug, then it's plausible. Some of these 8x10 rugs will take 2 years to make. So if you take a look at 4 weavers, 4 craftsmen working full time for 2 years, and if you sell that rug for 15,000, it still is a bargain. And essentially, it's a representation of the per capita income of the countries where they are made. If this same rug was made in US, you would be spending 200,000. Now, these weavers make very good money. Most of them are like independent tradesmen, craftsmen, and they are quite familiar with what the market is for their work overseas, and they price themselves accordingly.
So the market you buy is, as my understanding is, India, Pakistan, Nepal. There are 3 major markets where you.
That's where our manufacturing is. Yes.
Manufacturing is.
We are actually vertically integrated. We are one of the few companies in this industry that essentially not only control the production and designs and colors, but also are in retail. Historically, this model used to be that you would have manufacturers, and then you would have importers or wholesalers, and then you would have retailers. That business model has changed a little bit because of the competitive nature of this business and the margins becoming tighter and smaller, and retailers going directly into manufacturing, and so hence manufacturers came into retail. So the lines got a little blurred, and I think that's probably what you will see in the future, is that the companies who do well and have the ability to provide latest and the greatest in terms of colors, designs, and trends would also be manufacturers.
Now, whenever we talk about rugs and manufacturing of rugs, especially in India, Pakistan, Nepal, the issue of child labor comes in there.
Yes.
And because there's softness of fingers and tiny fingers, and I don't know the details, but that's what we have read in the media. How do you deal with that situation? It
is a challenge, and it used to be a much bigger challenge than what it is today. The violation actually takes place on the manufacturing end, not so much so on the retail end, not so much so on the import end. When we enter into contracts for production for our rugs, we enter into rates and financial arrangement which is in keeping with the labor laws, the import laws, fair wages, fair working conditions. Now, occasionally you're going to have a manufacturer who would violate that. But we have to be very careful as to what we call child labor. There's a difference between bonded child labor and then a labor or apprenticeship that young weavers. So instead of, college and education, after a basic education of, let's say, high school, is not for everyone, as we know it here and as we know it in any other developed society, that some children end up in technical fields, some end up in the artistic fields, and some go on to go to college.
Sure.
Well, India, Pakistan, and Nepal is no different also. Some of these families who have had their heritage in the craftsman arena prefer their children to stay in that trade because they have faith, confidence, and they have the ability to train and develop them. So if a loom is set up in a home, which 90% of the looms are set up in a home, it allows the mother to work with the children, and the children have to be at least 14 years old to be able to weave anyways. And this is a myth that only fine carpets are made by children, because the master weavers who make these fine carpets are not children. They are experienced weavers who know how to do this work over the years of experience. And you don't become a master weaver at the age of 14 or 15 or 16. You become a master weaver at the age of 30.
Sure. Do you travel to these countries?
Yes, we have our own manufacturing. Our primary manufacturing is in India, in Mirzapur and Bhadoi, which is outside of Varanasi,
Sure.
and in Jaipur, in northern India. And different rugs and different styles are made in different areas, because as you know that Varanasi and Jaipur are two regions of India that have the finest craftsmen, and they have a history of craftsmanship in other areas, and in weaving as well. So, and we've been doing it for 3 generations. My son just came in the business this summer. He graduated from Bentley, and he is going to be the 4th generation joining Dover Rug.
So tell us that your entry into the rug business, how you got involved into this. And
my entry into the rug business was an interesting situation. It actually did not happen by design, but perhaps more as my love and passion for rugs and art form from my heritage, which is from India and Pakistan. I graduated with a master's, with an MBA, and I was in the
in the US or
in the US, yes.
Okay. Where was that?
At UCLA and Northrop University.
Okay. I went to USC.
Oh, I will not hold that against you.
Okay.
And so I realized somewhere along the line in my career that there is a glass ceiling. This is only so far and so much I can go, especially in the financial services and the investment areas that I was in. And so I started to look around and see what would be a good fit for me, where I could engage my passion, be able to connect with my culture and my heritage, be able to travel in that part of the world, and sort of be the ambassador of our culture and our heritage and our art form in the society or in the home, in my new home that I had chosen. And rugs emerged to be the most viable product, and this business was in the family for a very long time. It was on the manufacturing and on the export side, but we were never in retail. So in the late 80s, I decided to open our first store in center of Dover. You know, Dover is a very small, bucolic community. Exactly. Our first store was 350 square feet, and half of that was a room in the basement.
That was going to be my next question, that how did you come up with the name Dover? So I was thinking that maybe it has to do something with the Dover.
Well, I still live in Dover, and the company started in Dover. So this was sort of a pilot project for us to test the market, to see how we will fare in retail.
Let's backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
So you came as a student, obviously, in to UCLA, right?
Yes.
Which year was that?
1974.
1974.
And then I came to Boston in 1978.
So what brought you to Boston?
At the time, I was with Prudential Beach, which was a financial and an investment. It was part of a Prudential insurance company in the financial services area. I came here as a development manager in one of their offices here in Boston, and I stayed with them for I would say good 8 or 10 years before I decided to.
So you started Dover in 1997 or something?
No, in the late 80s.
In late 80s, okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
So almost 10 years I was in the investment field. And so I was looking for something which would utilize my business acumen and my business education, and also be involved in the art and the culture of my heritage.
Excellent. You mentioned that 4 generations. So can you talk a little bit more about the first generation?
Yes, the generation that started this concept was my grandfather's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and his vision was to create employment in the rural
Mm-hmm.
areas
Mm-hmm.
of India and Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular create employment and empower women
Mm-hmm.
financially,
Mm-hmm.
because as I said, 90% of the looms are set up in homes, and a lot of the looms are set up in villages, in rural agricultural environment, and agricultural work is seasonal work also.
Sure.
So and especially in winters, they need alternate source of income.
So which part of India and Pakistan you come from?
Agra.
Agra. Yeah.
Yes, and historically the carpet weaving came to India through Agra and Lahore
Mm-hmm.
during the Mughal periods.
Mm-hmm.
Persian weavers and Persian master weavers were asked to come to India and set up carpet workshops
Mhm.
in Agra and in Lahore,
Mhm.
and that's where still the tradition prevails. I mean, there are still
Mhm.
some very traditional production in Agra and in Lahore. So so my grandfather's vision was to have an alternate source of income, empower women, and allow them to utilize local raw materials,
Mhm.
and be able to make a product that does not require a huge amount of technology, and also create employment in the rural areas as opposed to in the cities, because as you know, there's always pressure in the cities
Sure.
for the migrant workers who come in from the rural areas. So this was wonderful because people were able to work in their villages, in their homes, and their product was a source of foreign exchange for the country. And in the city, he started the first women's college
Where was that?
in Lahore
Lahore.
in the late 1800s.
So they moved to after partition to
My grandfather moved,
yeah.
but his family stayed in Agra.
Okay.
And Delhi basically
okay,
after Agra.
So have you visited personally Agra? That
Oh yeah, I am there at least once or twice a year
Mhm.
for my.
So how do you
collection.
feel when you visit?
It's wonderful. I mean, it's like visiting my roots. It's
Mhm.
visiting my heritage. It's visiting my culture.
Mhm.
That's one great thing about the subcontinent is that if you set aside the politics,
Sure.
there's tremendous amount of love and affection and exchange of culture and ideas that has survived all kinds of politics.
Mhm.
Not only in just rugs but in performing arts and literature and the writers' exchange that takes place. So fortunately, these forms have kept the two countries connected,
Sure.
and I hope that continues to be the
Sure.
case.
You have, talking about music, you have played a very important role in various non-profit groups and organizations. And also, actually, I had seen you once. There was one music program, and you were taking some few dollars and giving that. I don't know. I think it was investing or somewhere in one of these.
It must have been a qawwali.
Yeah, it was a qawwali. Yes, yeah, exactly.
See,
Yes.
qawwali is a very traditional Indian form of music.
Sure.
That came to us through the great Indian Sufi poets.
Yes.
Sure. Like Amir
Mhm.
Khusro, and so this is a good hybrid between the Indian and the Muslim culture.
Sure.
And it's devotional poetry and it's devotional music. Now the tradition is that in order to support these musicians, you at these events or at these concerts, if you would, when they recite this devotional poetry, you shower them with gifts, if you would, and the gift being money.
Sure.
And it's a way of supporting them.
Sure.
It's not a huge genre with a huge pop culture following, if you would. So they do small gatherings, and their performances would be at the shrines and of the Sufis.
So you are quite active in these type of programs.
Well,
You support them, I should say.
Well, yes. I mean, I think for a variety of reasons. First of all, it is the most tolerant form of Islamic tradition. It Sufism is very accommodating. It's an ideal form of interfaith dialogue.
Absolutely. I love Sufism. Just, my grandfather was one of the biggest Sufis I can think of.
Well,
really, absolutely.
So I mean that's primarily was my love for it, and frankly, in order to survive in the rug business, you almost have to be a Sufi.
Okay, yeah, okay.
The demands it makes.
Well, I think we think that the Dover rug is doing absolutely fantastic. That's
well, thank you.
Yes,
thank you. We try, and I think if you stay your course and are sincere and committed to your cause, your customers, your consumers, your market recognizes that. And I think that's what differentiates you from people who are in it purely for profit, or they don't understand the product, or they have no cultural connection to it. They're just doing it for the almighty dollar. And sometimes that comes across, and you can tell that, not only from the interactions that you have with your customers, but also with the type of rugs that you make, that you are more worried about what the next phase or trend is going to be. You're more concerned about whether it's going to match the curtains and the furniture as opposed to the artistic integrity of the rug. And I can understand that, for some people it's the right approach to take. It's perhaps an easy approach to take, and in some cases may even be more profitable. But it's not sincere to the heritage and to the culture, because it is an art form. It's an expressive art form. These are expressive designs. Decorative arts are expressive designs, and carpets in particular, and rugs in particular, tell a story, or talk about a region, or talk about a heritage, or talk about a phenomena, or talk about religion, or inspirations, or dreams and wishes of people. And you can't box that in to a color and a style and a trend.
Sure. Now, at your own home, who selects the rug, you or your wife?
Actually, funny you say that. I'm only an expert outside of the house. I mean, inside the house, I forego all my authorities. I guess most decent men have to do that.
Yes, true. Yeah, every man should do that. Actually, we had a recently very nice workshop and seminar, one-day seminar on domestic violence, and it is done by a group called Saheli.
Saheli, yes.
They did a great job. So it was wonderful. So we spent whole day just talking about the manhood and how it plays all these roles. It was really amazing experience. It was a full house and fun thing. So I'm glad that you have given that power to your better half and the household. Also, tell me, you have been active in this squash team.
Yes.
How you got interested in that sports?
Well, growing up in that part of the world, we grew up playing squash, and for the longest time, Pakistan and India had dominated the squash world. And New England is ripe for squash. And we thought that there was a need for a squash academy as opposed to clubs. There were plenty of clubs. But we felt that if we establish an academy which will essentially teach the sport to new members, to people who were interested in the sport, to students, to schools and colleges and universities who wanted to develop their teams, but they did not have the resources, because that's one of the challenges we have, is that we just simply do not have a critical mass of world ranking players here in US that can establish programs for schools, colleges and universities. So there was a void there. And it also gave us an opportunity to create a bridge for players and athletes and ranking players from developing countries of India, Pakistan, Egypt, to be able to make inroads here into US, give them a platform where they can either have careers here in US, be able to promote the sport, and also have a future for themselves, because sometimes once they retire from professional squash, the future is somewhat bleak for some of these athletes. So essentially what this academy does is that on one hand it becomes a gateway for young athletes to come here and further their skills and compete internationally by improving their game here and having the ability
When
to...
did you start this academy here?
I've been involved with squash since mid-80s. And then when we built our facilities in Natick, we built a squash and a fitness club with squash courts and a yoga and a fitness studio, and essentially it's doing quite well. Fay School is one of our clients. We just signed a joint venture agreement with MIT. We would be their official coaches for developing their team. We hired former world number one, Terry Linku, who was also French number one. And we have 3 or 4 other coaches that conduct these programs, clinics, lessons, and development of players. It's a wonderful concept.
Excellent, excellent. Now let's talk about yourself, your philosophy of life. And so, as an immigrant, what do you think, how challenging the life has been here?
Well, the life has always been a challenge for immigrants for a variety of reasons. Number one, anytime you leave your home, your culture, your heritage, your family, your frame of references, you sort of have to reinvent the wheel. You sort of need to figure everything out from scratch. So that in itself puts you at a handicap. And then on top of that, if you want to succeed and do well, then that adds that additional dimension to it. But in case of the Muslims and the Middle Eastern folks and Muslims from India and Pakistan, that whole dimension changed after 9/11. It was a complete new landscape.
Sure.
And just about every Muslim or anyone who looked like a Muslim, regardless of whether they were Hindus or Sikhs or from the Middle East, they were almost held personally liable, or people were looking answers to them that why did it happen, and as if they have some responsibility for it. Whereas these folks are just like any other American, living the normal life, sending their children to school. But that sort of added an additional pressure on the
So in
immigrants.
post 9/11 world, did personally you feel any pressure or any discrimination? Or?
If I did, I don't know it, because I frankly do not pay a whole lot of attention to that, because when it comes to prejudices and bigotry, I take the approach that Jesus Christ did when he was being walked to his cross. He prayed to God, saying that forgive them because they do not know. It's normal for a dog to bark and humans to avoid the dog. It's not normal for humans to bark back.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So that's the approach that I take, is that, why waste your time with the folks like that?
Okay. Now, in terms of your strength, like as an immigrant, what do you think that, of course, there are always ups and downs, especially when you start a business. What do you think is a strength, a power, or something which has really kept you going, I have to do this?
Well, you can If the world gives you lemon, you're supposed to make lemonade with it.
Sure.
And in my case, coming to America as an immigrant was very similar to some of the great immigrants that came to this country and built this country. And majority of them were immigrants. Frankly, all of them were immigrants.
Sure.
I mean, other than Native Americans,
Sure.
everybody is an immigrant. So it is a land of opportunity. It is a land that still caters to immigrants, and still is a land where immigrants are welcomed more than any other society. So you can actually use your immigrant status as a form of strength, as opposed to being discouraged by it. And that's what we did, that I was able to take my heritage and my culture and bring a product to this society and be able to open up a window of another culture with a business model that was a win-win situation. It created employment in my past land, and it brought a product here that frankly required certain special skills that I as an immigrant had, that an average second, third, fourth immigrant in this country would not have.
Sure.
So in my case, my immigrant background was a strength, that I was able to travel into these parts of the world, I was able to speak the language, I was able to blend in, and more so now, when it becomes such a dangerous place for Westerners to travel, it's much easier for me to be in these parts of the world. And nobody is safe, but at least I'm safer, and I blend in a little bit better than...
So what is the one message you will give to the immigrants here who come here to the US?
My message to them would be is that frankly there are no hurdles. The only hurdles and handicaps that you will see would be the creation of your mind. There are going to be challenges, but there would be just as many challenges if you were in your own homeland, if not more. Do not let the immigrant card create a situation for you where it's a handicap. And frankly, we live in a very happy, pluralistic, democratic society that embraces immigrants, and there's plenty of proof of that. I think you need to be sincere, honest, and hardworking, and stick to your core values, because they seem, and they tend to work.
Sure.
As opposed to being lost in second, third generation.
Now, coming back towards the end of the interview, and let us talk a little bit more about the rugs. So for someone like me who has absolutely no idea what is a good rug, what is a bad rug, and so what are a few tips you will give us that, you know, these are the things you should really look for when you are shopping for a rug?
Shopping for a rug is, in a lot of ways, it's like shopping for a diamond. You know, they say in diamonds that there are 4 C's to consider: color, cut, carat, and there's a fourth one that I'm drawing a blank. Same
We'll
thing.
go with 3 then.
Okay, okay. Color, cut, clarity.
Clarity.
With rugs, it's the same. The number of knots per square inch will give you the clarity of pattern and the number of colors that you can do. That directly equates to labor. So that's one yardstick to use. Second one is the artistic integrity of the rug. You could have the most finely woven rugs, but if the color combination is not right, if the scale is not right, if the pattern is not right, if the pattern is not woven accurately and properly, and it's not square and plumb or so, it doesn't matter how many knots you have, it's not going to be a desirable rug. Sometimes the uniqueness of the rug also establishes a price. If it's unique, if it's unusual, people will pay a premium for it. And the person who is on the manufacturing end would also be charging a premium for that, because they know that this is one of a kind that they have. So that's sort of in the new rug arena. Now in the old rugs, all bets are off. None of these principles apply. There, it's the age, it's the uniqueness, and how rare it is. And of course, the size makes a huge difference.
Sure.
Antiques are in a category of their own, just like.
Do you sell antique rugs?
We do. The another closest example of pricing rugs is fine arts. Why does a Manet sells for 26 million, and another artist who can create exactly the same replica, same colors, and all of that, won't even get a fraction of that.
Sure.
So there are those elements also. But at the end of the day, the sincere advice that I can give you is that it's a client-professional relationship. In order for you to buy a good rug, it's going to be a client-professional relationship. You need to find a trustworthy dealer, someone who has a good reputation, someone who has good references, and someone who will guide you in the right way and will price the product properly for you. Because unfortunately, there are some questionable characters in this business who have done some really questionable business practices that has given the industry a bad name.
Sure. I have two quick questions. One is that, have you been walking in a store and you have looked at a customer and you have been surprised, oh my God, this customer is in my store? Any famous, infamous people you have seen?
Oh, it actually happens more frequently than one would think. I mean, all the way from many years ago, Lee Iacocca, he's our client. His family is our client. Teddy Bruschi, the Patriots, very popular. We have celebrities, we have actors, there are some people I can't mention because of privacy issues, but it's not unusual for us to run into those people. And we try to cater to them in a way that they don't feel uncomfortable if we don't give them any preferential treatment because of the star power and what have you. I think in some cases it may even make them uncomfortable. By the way, I did want to come back to the child labor issue that you had raised.
Sure.
That issue for all practical reasons is gone. During the Bill Clinton era, we were able to, with the help of the US government, we were able to put some very, very strict laws on the books in terms of the importation of rugs which use child labor. So essentially what that did was that it put the pressure on the manufacturer not to violate child labor laws. And in order to enforce that, we hired Amnesty International and some other non-profit consumer and labor advocate groups in India and Pakistan to do audits of the looms, make surprise visits, and if they found any child labor, bonded or non-bonded, they were fined, they were charged, and they were prosecuted, and their items were banned from importation. So they not only have to certify that all rugs coming into US are child labor free, but they're also subject to surprise inspections.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
And all the best for your new store.
Thank you so kindly for having me.
Thank you. Sure.
It's a pleasure to be here.